I'm Heather Van Dyke with World Affairs Council of Central Florida, and I'm joined today by Francisco Tovar, an IVLP alum from 2017.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I know much has changed in your life since 2017, but let's start from the beginning when you first visited the United States. Where are you from? What was the IVLP project that brought you to the United States, and what were you doing at that time?
Caracas, Venezuela. And I came to the US back in February 2017, and it was the IVLP project. And the very subject of that year was getting to know the political participation of minorities in the American process, how the minorities actually engage in this participation. It was really, really exciting because I got to know some of the coolest, smartest, and biggest people I could have ever thought I would meet. So it was something really, really good for my life. I traveled with my colleagues all the way from Washington, D.C. to LA, to Philadelphia, to Tulsa, Oklahoma, to everywhere. And we met with the commissions of the main parties in the U.S., which are Democratic and Republican. We had the opportunity to see both sides of the coin, and it was a very particular, special time because it was the very beginnings of President Trump as in his first term. So we had the chance to see what it felt like, what the air was feeling like, what the vibe was, what people were saying. I remember that, in fact, it was in that year, that same week we arrived, that Prime Minister Netanyahu from Israel was also in DC. So you could tell that it was history in the making, and we had the opportunity to be front row. It was something really good.
Wow. And all of that is coming full circle to our time right now.
Yes, indeed. It's incredible. I think it was an opportunity that I would never forget.
Wonderful. And were there any big takeaways from your time in the IVLP program? And are you in contact with anybody here in the United States through the IVLP program?
I learned a lot of things. I think it, in many ways, changed my life. It changed the way I was experiencing the U.S. in my mind. You see, back in our countries, in South America, we have a different notion of what the U.S. is like. And it's generally something that is constructed upon the Hollywood perspective, if you will, of the social things, and how this changed your mind is really curious, because once you get the opportunity to be here, it's nothing like you see on TV or you experience from a third party. For instance, you could tell that here in the U.S., the notion of segregation and racism, well, it tends to be perceived much more profound and dramatic abroad. And you would tell, my goodness, look at this. Even though I had come to the U.S. several times, I never had the chance to interact with political figures and civil rights activists. So this gave me the chance to fully notice what was going on. And I learned that, oh, look at this. It's not the way it looks from outside. For instance, in our countries, in my country, Venezuela, you could tell that there is racism, but there isn't a conversation, there isn't a public debate about it. And it's really, really, really sad, and it makes things worse. Kind of like a person who has a condition, a disease, and never admits it and never talks about it. Well, that's what's happening in my country. We are barely having the conversation of racism and discrimination in the 21st century, while you've been having this conversation for a long time, for centuries. And people in the U.S., African-American people generally, are very much aware of their conditions and very proud. And this has been the main factor that has created the conditions to some of the biggest conquests, such as the Civil Rights Act and all the conditions we see nowadays in terms of empowerment, in terms of political figures and participation, in terms of social participation. And you don't see that in the same terms you see it in the U.S. in Latin America. So that changed my mind. It blew my mind away.
Yes, yes. It's one of my, what I like the best about the IVLP program is that it gives people the opportunity to really see more about the American lifestyle and the American culture than they would when they come for holiday. It's a completely different experience. Living in Orlando, you have the Disney, and then you have Orlando and the different cities that IVLP people get to see, whereas most tourists just end up in the Disney area. So yeah, I completely understand what you're expressing there. Wonderful.
That's so true, because you need to have a real basis to make a judgment, to make an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we all have the right to make an opinion, have an opinion, and make a statement. But we first have the task, the obligation to be thoroughly informed. And
Yes,
then we make an opinion, not the other way around.
yes. And are you in contact with anybody that you met through the IVLP program?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I have good friends in different countries. Some of the people who came from Dominican Republic, people who came from Bolivia as well, from Nicaragua, and also the people in the U.S., the ones who give us the opportunity to have a conversation with the community, people in Washington, D.C., people in Philadelphia, with the some grassroots organizations that interacted with us. I think it was really good. We'll still get to talk with them every now and then, and we became friends, I would say, not just contacts or acquaintances.
I love
And I
that.
like
That is wonderful.
that. Yeah, indeed, indeed.
So now the important question, and I think the one that most people want to hear, is what has changed in your life since the program, and what are you doing today?
Well, it's been 3 years since the IBLP happened, and it's been quite a ride. For starters, I'm no longer living in my country in Venezuela. I'm living in the U.S. Um, I had to leave my country. I had to flee my country because of political persecution. Sadly, one of my good friends, Fernando Alban, I would say right today, October the 8th, it's the anniversary of his assassination by the government.
Oh, no, I'm
So
sorry.
that changed my perspective of what human rights activism is and what it entails in my country. Sadly, I've been away for quite some time. I would say more than 4 years away from my country. I haven't not been able to see my family. And well, I still continue to work. I still continue to do human rights work here in the U.S. I was in Colombia doing it as well, and I can tell that it goes beyond the mere area that I was focused on, which was people of African descent. It goes way beyond that because it entails a whole context of human rights in my country, whether or not you're people of African descent. So I had the opportunity in 2017 the same year, 2017 in December, to talk to the United Nations Human Rights Commissioner in Geneva, Switzerland, and I became a witness in the country briefing he was doing, the report he was doing in that year. My testimony was featured there as one of the victims of the government, and I think that it was really something important because the message of people that wouldn't normally be able to have a say came across through me in terms of saying, hey, this is the way we experience the dictatorship in Venezuela. This is what happens in Venezuela. And this is the way people of African descent experience it. And that is a very unique perspective because you don't hear that voice very often. You don't hear about
Mhm.
people of African descent in Venezuela. It is just implied that we are all equal and we have any kind of differences, if you will, but it's not the case. There is a difference in Venezuela if you're a person of African descent, even though we have a very obvious racism. There is this structural racism. These conditions that you see people of African descent in poor conditions, in worse neighborhoods, in worse social, economic uh, um, um, possibilities, and as opposed to other segments of the population. So the challenge in my country is to acknowledge this situation and to have the state and the international community to realize that there is an issue that is not being addressed. So that was my opportunity, and I think I pretty much did it in a satisfactory way. I got the message across. So I continue to work in that subject, but through a different perspective. I realized that much of the things I'm trying to do lack some kind of lasting power, if you will, some boost. Then I came to a realization, well, what I'm doing, which is social work, which is human rights and activism, needs a spiritual dimension to make it really important and to have a lasting effect in the community. So I decided that I want to engage in a social change from a different perspective, from the educational perspective, from the spiritual perspective, realizing that people need to have self-esteem, need to have a notion of belonging in their communities, need to understand where they come from before we engage in the very ambition of changing the world. I don't know if I'm being straightforward with this message, if I'm making any sense. But the thing is, I understood that I was not being as effective as I wanted to be because I didn't have a spiritual notion or understanding of what I was doing. I needed to find myself in terms of finding the reason why I was doing what I was doing in the first place. Is it just out of ego? Is it just out of self-realization? Is it just out of praise of, oh, hey, look at that, you're really good and something? Or is it just because I really want to change things? So that confronted me in a very profound way. That I found out that, yes, I want to do things right, but I'm going about it the wrong way. So I need to start by helping people, by educating people, if you will, people, African descendant communities, raise awareness of who we are, what we're up against. And then that very realization is going to make the change by itself. Not because I'm very powerful or can do things, but because I'm creating the conditions for people to become aware. So that's what I understand as of now. That's what I'm doing now. And I become a life coach, and I use all the experience at IVLP and the United Nations and everything I've done to create awareness on social issues and the spiritual issues, if you will. If you want to look at my website, that would be franciscojtovar.com. You will find a lot of things I'm doing with the background I'm bringing, well, up to now, and the things I want to do in the future.
I love that. I love that you're helping people from your experience that you've had in your home country, your experiences through IVLP, and your experiences here in Orlando.
Yes, big time. I've lived a lot of things here in Orlando. It's awesome.
That is wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing with us today. Taking time to share what's happened on your journey is helping others to do with their journeys. So we appreciate you doing that.
Thank you for the opportunity you had. I really appreciate it. I hope to see you again, and we can continue to have the conversations on social issues and the things that are going on here in your country and mine as well, and everywhere, because I believe that this 2020 is a very important year in our lives. It's a trying time, and we need to see what we become after we get through all this.
I agree. Well, thank you very much, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.